Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Thursday. Oh, yeah, right. It's February 1st. That's right. It's a new month. February 1st, 2024. It's altogether Thursday, February 1st, 2024. It's a little less exciting that way somehow. One of those things was supposed to be exciting. Anyway, so fantastic. We made it through 1/12 of the year, I guess. I don't know whether it is correct if you count it by a number of days. But, you know, we break it down into 12 units of unequal size. What can you do? And here we are. Here we find ourselves one day ahead of Groundhog Day, which I guess makes Saturday or maybe Sunday Eastern Orthodox Groundhog Day. Not really certain exactly how their version of it works. It is, well, it's Black History Month, and I guess they've kicked that off with a bang. Lots of chatter this morning on the social medias about the publication of a brand new book, I guess. Well, but the New York Times is at fault here, is what's going on. Everybody chatting about a New York Times article about a new book, which is also just sort of an interesting thing. I mean, there's a substantive discussion, or substantive discussion, if you wish, to have about the contents of the article, and Jamel Bouie's doing a fantastic job covering that. It is the book by one Coleman Hughes. The title of the article, "The Young Black Conservative Who Grew Up With and Rejects DEI." Holy mackerel. And the subheader reads, "Coleman Hughes wants a colorblind society. In his new book, he recounts how schools emphasized his racial identity and other students' white privilege." And I'm certain that there's a point to be made here in all of this. Though the chief point appears to be not all that good, and Jamel Bouie is doing, like I said, along with many others, doing a great job deflating some of this. I mean, probably the most disappointing passage I've seen excerpted so far is that, I should also point out, the article is written by Jeremy W. Peters for the New York Times, and he is aghast to find out, I guess, or particularly encouraged maybe to find out that there is a young black conservative writer who thinks that maybe the the orthodoxy on DEI and anti-racism might somehow be wrong. And he's pretty sure that this is the case because, and I don't know if Jeremy Peters was shocked to find this out, but as it turns out, Coleman Hughes is aware that Martin Luther King at one point said in a speech that his dream that he had that day, in fact, was that that his children and young people all across America would one day, be judged by the content of their character rather than the color of their skin. I don't know if you've heard this one, but it's a real surprise. But naturally, that one would get quoted in this one, and no other ones, but at any rate, I haven't given Hughes the courtesy of reading over his theories just yet. I just found it interesting in a number of ways, and of course, watching Jamel Bouie react to it and other people react to his reaction to it, I was just sort of struck by the fact that there was a book published that was explicitly about race, and all these people at the New York Times were able to obtain it and read it. I didn't think that was possible anymore. I thought it was given to understand that that was illegal in many states. And I would just like to know how it got into their hands to get reviewed and whether or not somebody needs to be fired. Was it bought taken out of a library? Does that library need to be burned down at any point? I just want to keep up with things because I'm a law-abiding citizen here. And as much as I'd like to, entertain your heterodox viewpoints, there's laws to uphold. So, I don't know. I was just a little bit interested about that. And I'm always interested in the importance that newspaper publishers continue to put on the publication of this other medium, books. I mean, it's still like the gateway to being taken seriously, even if your ideas don't really need to be taken seriously. If you write a book about it, that changes everything. You can blog about it. You can podcast about it. You can speak about it at TED Talks all you want. But until they can put author and then your name on the screen when they're interviewing you on TV or under your the caption of your picture, they don't really seem to take notice. And that's not to mention the weird trend of having your own reporters writing books while they're writing stories for your newspaper, and then them saving all the juiciest stuff and the bombshells and the things people really need to know, say, before they vote, for books that get published after the election, and the news only makes it into the papers as a report on the new forthcoming book and excerpting all the good stuff, and then everybody reading it there. And then it's just an odd thing that the newspapers still place so much importance on books. And I don't know. It's just an odd thing to me. I never really have understood that entirely. I mean, there's a lot of work that has to go into doing a book. And it used to be that they would be researched and fact-checked extensively. But no longer the case anyway. So that's today's morning social media flap. I'm sure we'll get into it. In the meantime, one of the former presidents of the United States is doing terrible things again, and in some cases losing in court, even if he doesn't actually acknowledge or understand or know it. But Greg Dworkin is here, and he can tell us all about it. Good morning, Greg.
Hey, good morning.
Hey.
So the thing to do is if Jeremy Peters writes something, ignore it.
That's what I would ordinarily have done, I think. But, of course, you know how it is. Everybody else gave it attention, and I was forced to do that.
Frankly.
Yeah, I don't actually. It doesn't ring a bell for me.
Oh, he's terrible.
I imagine. Yeah, I read the names of the people who every time I read one of their articles on the air, I still don't. It still doesn't ring a bell for me. But okay, I believe you. You read them and you pay closer attention.
You know, you make a list over the years. Patrick Healy, Jeremy Peters. You look at it and say, forget it. I'm not even reading it.
Okay. Well, I haven't. So maybe I need to not do it later, which I was thinking of doing.
Right. Then there are the reporters with sort of an edge to it, you know, the edgy younger reporters who you also have to ignore sometimes, like Jonathan Martin. You know, so these guys have good right-wing sources. So if that's what you're looking for, okay, read it. But if you're looking for analysis, don't bother.
Yeah, I don't know what I was looking for here. I was looking to see what was making Jamel mad. So I was happy with that.
The whole business model for media is you have to write a book in order to make a living.
That's the thing.
That's unfortunately true because a lot of places are folding. The latest that folded is The Messenger, which was an online startup that was funded by, I guess VC capitalists or something. And they lured good reporters like Mark Caputo, who covers Florida, away from their regular outlets and then just fold it. They literally turned off the light, shut off the healthcare, canceled the email, closed Slack in the middle of people writing emails to each other. They just went.
Huh. That's didn't wait.
Oh my gosh, I have surgery scheduled tomorrow. I mean, that was one of them.
Wow. Oh, okay. Well, that's I saw that fly by, and then I thought I'll go back and look at that because didn't they open last week? Basically,
yeah, they've been on for about 3-4 months. They've had some very good story. Adam Klasfeld, who covers legal stuff for them, is terrific. I hope these guys find a place to go quickly. But that's why they write books.
I guess so. Yeah, no one can take the book away. And, look, social media, the big boon of social media for reporters is your followers are still your followers, and you can tell us where you go to publish afterwards, and everybody just moves with you. Right. So it's you can bring your portfolio and your readership with you when you move. That's nice.
So today we're going to follow up just a little bit on some of the things we talked about yesterday. And then talk about the election, and talking about the election in terms of the assumption here, which is to say with me, is that Biden wins a very close election.
That is a good assumption. I'm not looking
for a landslide. I'm not looking for Trump to landslide. Biden's in trouble. He's down by 17 and all of this swing, garbage polls. Forget those.
Okay.
So we'll cover stuff. Let's start with what we did yesterday. Our friend Brandy Buckman has a really nice article in Law and Crime, which she now writes for.
I like the crime part.
Even Jefferson Davis recognized Section 3 automatically disqualified him. Dozens of historians urged Supreme Court to remove Trump from the 2024 ballot.
Yeah, all over the place.
So the Don Amici amicus curiae extension, footnote, whatever you want to call it.
Oh, yes.
Dozens.
There are many.
This is the one that the historians put together. And so it's a really nice story on that. I gave you the link. So your listeners, if they want to read a little bit about what's really in there and they don't really feel like reading the PDF, you can read this story.
We should read the PDF. But yeah.
Well, I sent you that too, I think, yesterday. But
yes, I think so.
If you haven't gotten around to it, I'm not surprised.
Right. Well, I'm in the middle of War and Peace right now, so it's going to be a while.
Yeah, that always happens. Right. I've been in the middle of War and Peace for like 40 years, so whenever something happens, I'd like to read your book, but I'm in the middle of War and Peace.
Yeah, chapter 8,000.
Same page.
Yeah.
Same page I was in 1978.
It's great sleep aid. Better than Ambien.
Anyway, for 40 pages, roughly, the amicus brief traverses centuries to expose lively and often clear congressional debate about the so-called insurrectionist clause. And the reason it's so interesting is that historians bring in congressional actual words. Talk about textual analysis. Well, this is what they said.
They write this down for a reason.
Yeah, and its understanding among senators, as well as its import in the impeachment of Andrew Johnson and how it came to force when it was time to reckon with one of America's most famous insurrectionists, Jeff Davis. Analysis of this evidence demonstrates that decision makers crafted Section 3 to cover the president and create an enduring check on insurrection requiring no additional action from Congress, the historians wrote.
All right.
The authors, renowned experts in the Civil War Reconstruction era, politics, law, elections, and more, say Section 3 was clearly meant to be broad in who it covered.
Yes, good.
It did not simply or solely apply to former Confederates who wished to hold federal or state office, but rather, they write, it was an active guard against corruption of government by anyone involved in future insurrections who had taken an oath in the U.S. Constitution, pointing to Jeff Davis, or as we like to call him, old Jeff Davis. And quoting Davis's own lawyer at the time, the historians noted, in seeking to quash his indictment for treason, Jeff Davis argued he was already punished through his automatic disqualification to hold public office under Section 3. It needs no legislation on the part of Congress to give it effect. It executes itself.
Well, of course, you could offer that up as a reason, too. It executes itself, and I'm offering that as a reason for you not to execute me. That's a weird thing to say. Like, you could be executed for treason. You don't need to do that. I'm already barred from holding public office. Seems like a lesser punishment, but okay, I take your point.
Right. So, though the historians briefly acknowledge that then Chief Justice Salmon Chase later seemed to take a different position, they emphasize that Chase's ruling on Section 3 disqualification, quote, required congressional action applied only to officials lawfully in office before the states ratified the 14th Amendment, end quote.
All right.
So for those of
Makes
you
some sense.
who think, well, but Congress has to do something. Well, only if you're really old.
I guess. Yeah, that's interesting.
Like 150 years old.
I mean, I feel like I understand the desire to have it easily ratified that way. That Congress has taken certain action. It's just the text of it doesn't say what any action should be, for one thing. But now they ought to go back to the two judges who said in the cases of now mooted case of Madison Cawthorn and Murdery Trader Green, who are faced with this same accusation,
right? Where
the judges said, no, that was explicitly supposed to apply only to people who had participated in the Civil War as Confederates.
It would have some
you're wrong.
implications. And then they look at Andrew Johnson, and they note when Johnson was impeached in 1868, decision makers explicitly, this is a quote, explicitly recognized the president as a civil or constitutional officer, and they noted Andrew Johnson, President Johnson,
that guy,
routinely described himself as the chief executive officer of the United States.
Yeah, I mean, that's just straight up, they say
officer,
it all the time.
The word officer. How do you textually, originalist read officer as not officer.
I don't know. I mean, at bottom, it doesn't make any sense. Although, at a textual level, I say, so a guy said he was an officer. What if Vermin Supreme says he's an officer? He's not.
Well,
an
here's
officer.
another one. Given that the president is subject to impeachment, and everybody agrees on that,
Yeah.
he must hold an office in the United States, or the phrase removal from office would have no meaning.
Well, removal from, they meant the office that he's in, the actual room. We just want you to get out of here. I don't know what you're doing here, but leave this room, sir.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. It's bizarre.
The presidency must be one of the offices of honor, trust, or profit.
You would think.
Under the United States. Otherwise, a convicted president could run for presidency again. The terms honor, trust, or profit adds nothing to the term office. All federal offices, whether elected or appointed, convey honor, require trust, and are paid.
Yeah. Right. And, that's the one that Trump was interested in, the profit one.
Right. So at the time, the brief notes that 2 years before Johnson was impeached, a congressional debate unfolded between two senators, Reverdy Johnson of Maryland and Lot Merrill of Maine.
Should get some real names.
Reverdy Johnson and Lot Merrill. Johnson of Maryland said he's an opponent of the 14th Amendment and questioned its sponsors directly on why the language may seem to omit the president.
Oh, yeah. Well, it doesn't.
Lot Morrill of Maine, an influential backer of congressional reconstruction in the 14th Amendment, corrected the senator. Let me call the senator's attention to the words, or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States, the congressman said more than a century ago.
Yeah, they already had this.
I said what I meant, and I meant what I said, and Elephant Faithful 100% or whatever, I mean, it's there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. To the extent that, if you want to, they could, of course, change their minds on the Supreme Court and say, well, we're not originalists. We changed our minds about that.
Yeah, as of now. But then after we finish this, we will be. And we don't want this to set a precedent. Right. Because we have a precedent for saying that we don't want this to set a precedent.
Exactly. I mean, I guess, if you really wanted to pull at these threads a little bit, and they usually do in the Supreme Court, you stand there and you say, all right, well, what we have here is one senator saying, yeah, it's covered, and another senator saying, no, it isn't. So what's the congressional
but it's a great
intent?
history lesson.
Yes, that's true. The point really, at minimum, you have to say they had this debate when they were passing it, and the proponents of the new amendment said, this is what we think it means. Of course, it is interesting that they can't, even then, they couldn't just say, you know what? I mean, I think you're crazy to think that the president isn't an officer, but let's write it in there and make an amendment. You want it in there, right? Okay. Yeah. So what do you say? You have an amendment, then he filibusters it.
No matter what you write, no matter what you add, no matter what amendment you put up, and whether or not you, bring up the previous question, the fact of the matter is politics says, I'm not going to understand what you're saying because I don't want to. I don't like your outcome.
It is, as you say, it's, your salary is dependent on misunderstanding it, right? So, okay. Yeah. They will continue to do so. Yeah, all right. Well, it is a very good and interesting history lesson. And especially the part about it, obviously, supposing that was probably the most ridiculous claim about the whole thing. The idea that it would not apply to future insurrections. Well, why put it in the Constitution then? Why not just have a statute that sunsets after the last Civil War veteran dies or something like that? But that was the real bizarre. They should reopen those cases. Marjorie Taylor Greene. Not that.
Well, after this is adjudicated, they may have the option to do so based on what the ruling is.
That would be nice. Madison Cawthorn, of course, whatever. Maybe you don't bother with him.
Now, the other item we should finish up with on yesterday was our good friend Doug J. Balloon, New York Times pitchbot, who's often pitch perfect on the pitchbot.
Should write a book.
He wrote yesterday a little tweet that said, "Don't say Tay. New Florida bill would forbid the mention of Taylor Swift in the state's high school classrooms."
Sure, why
not?
It's
satire, folks, but boy, it's funny and right on the mark.
Yep. Pretty good. I would like to know, are they allowed to read this guy's book from the New York Times this morning in Florida?
I don't think you're allowed to read books in Florida. I think you can only do picture books, and then only when they don't have words.
I was just wondering. But it did make me wonder about.
Right, so forget about Eric Carle or Richard Scarry or counting books or whatever.
No. But also just the importance that gets placed on books, as we were saying, as, gatekeepers to seriousness. You would think that people who think that about books would be more concerned about entire states banning books. They're obviously important to you. Why aren't you speaking out more? And, of course, we don't mean those books. We mean serious books.
Right. So let's turn to the news of the day.
All right.
This is also semi from yesterday because it happened yesterday. We talked about Congress is not doing anything, but actually the House passed something yesterday.
Wow.
They had to do it by suspension of the rules because the radicals wouldn't allow anything to happen. But they passed the Smith-Wyden bipartisan tax package, expanding the child tax credit and reviving business tax benefits for research and development, which passed the House under suspension 357 to 70.
Uh-huh.
More Democrats voted for it than Republicans. Now on to the Senate, where Chuck Grassley has already said, I don't see why we should pass this bill, said the nonagenarian. Is he now? Or is he still just an octogenarian?
He may just be an octo. I don't know. Is it cool to call him that for short?
I don't know. How much is a Brazilian? Well, that's a George W. Bush joke. But huge numbers in favor. More Democrats voted than Republicans. And Chuck Grassley said, I don't know why we should consider this tax bill. It might help Biden. We can't do that.
Yeah.
That's the entire Republican Party. He's speaking the quiet part out loud. We will do nothing for the good of the United States if it helps the opposition, because our priorities are very clear. That's what Democrats are going to run on, and I think it's really going to hurt Republicans.
Okay. And some of them who are nonagenarians. I looked it up. Yeah, he is. He's 90.
He's a nonagenarian.
You can't afford to hurt these guys like that. It's going to hurt them, but it's going to leave a mark, but maybe not for that long.
Anyway, so moving on to today. Today's about finance. Look, I'm not a finance guy.
All right.
But if the MAGA Super PAC raises $30 million,
if I had that would be great.
From the Rubes,
and
then transfers it to Save America, which is the PAC that's paying for the lawyers.
Yeah.
So if you raise $30 million,
if I do, me,
and then lose $300 million to Erdogan, who hasn't Erdogan, the Turkish, the judge in New York on the civil trial.
Prince
if you lose
Oberon.
$300 million there, and another $83 million to E. Jean Carroll.
Right.
So if you raise $30 million and then lose $383 million because your lawyers that you paid the $30 million to didn't win,
or know how to lawyer,
that's raising $30 million in order to lose $383 million. That doesn't sound sustainable to me. I'm not a finance guy, but that doesn't sound like you could do that.
That makes me smart.
And then NBC News writes, takeaways from the 2024 cash dash. Legal cases drain Trump as clash with Biden looms. Trump's campaign and Super PAC both spent more than they raised in their most recent finance reports, while Biden built up more reserves. Now, Biden has money. He doesn't have as much money as Trump had in 2020, which is not surprising. When a Republican is in the White House, corporate America opens up the fire hose.
Okay.
When you're a challenger, you got to work a little bit harder, and you don't automatically get the money, but you generally get plenty.
Yeah.
With Trump, not so much.
Well, remember, he's supposed to be the self-sustaining bazillionaire.
Yeah.
So it's okay.
They're sort of in trouble there. So Trump's recent threats to blackball Republican donors who don't give to him but give to Nikki Haley are about more than just loyalty. He needs the money.
Yes.
By comparison, Jonathan Allen writes in NBC News, Biden's campaign ended the year with $46 million in cash, far more than the $33 million Trump campaign held before the caucuses in the New Hampshire primary. And so Biden is doing better than Trump this year, not as well as Trump in 2020. You pick up the Trump in 2020 comparison if you want to make Biden's cash haul sound smaller, or you do it if you want to be fair, because I'm just going to mention that one and not the previous ones behind it, or whatever, Jeremy Peters style. But if you really just want to look at the two because they're running against each other, Biden's doing better.
All right. I mean,
And Democrats
just
announced
look at this
that
year.
Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are raising and saving money for campaign purposes, not legal fights.
Right. That could be the slogan, too. Can you fit this on a bumper sticker? When Joe Biden gives a loan to his kids, they pay it back.
Well, the way T.J. Ducklow, the spokesman, put it, while Donald Trump lights money on fire paying the tab of his various expenses.
Wink. Yeah.
Biden-Harris, powered by grassroots donors, is hard at work talking to voters.
Oh. That's boring. But
that doesn't fit on a bumper sticker. This one is from SV.A, writing in the HuffPost. Trump spent $30 million raised from small donor dollars on legal bills in the last 6 months. In all, lawyers trying to keep Trump solvent and out of prison received $54 million in 2023, thanks to his army of retirees and other loyal followers.
Yeah. They're on fixed incomes, damn it.
Yeah.
Did they receive it? I mean, they were due it.
Yeah.
But...
So the way Playbook puts it together, Donald Trump's burn rate.
Yeah.
Why did they spend more than they raised? 2 words: legal bills.
Yeah, of course. And losing in court. Judgments against you, but that's more than 2 words.
2 of Donald Trump's political action committee spent an astonishing $29 million in legal consulting and legal fees in the second half of the year.
Maybe.
Leaving only $5 million in his leadership PAC's coffers. In total, the former president spent roughly $50 million in donor funds. All told, his web of committees spent roughly $210 million during 2023 while raising a bit shy of $200. So he has a net $10 million. Pocket change for him. Well, at least it was until he is the big two.
Yeah, that doesn't even count the money he has to pay.
Has to an escrow. I mean, you can't use that money.
Well, you can't use it. It doesn't count it. This is just money he owes his lawyers. Who knows whether he's actually paid them or not, but he holds that liability too.
Yeah, it's like a get out of jail bond. You got to put the money up.
Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Net Roots Radio. There's more to say, more things that happened yesterday. Oh, finance, okay. I love
look,
finance.
I mean, if you think that poll numbers make your eyes cross, what about finance numbers?
Yeah, definitely. More so than anything else.
Here's one number. Two. Here's 2 numbers. Okay, so here's 2 things. Biden's good but not great quarter. This is Politico following up on the Trump money. Okay. In aggregate, committees affiliated with Biden raised $97 million in quarter 4 and began 2024 with $117 million in cash on hand. That's less than Trump had at this stage in 2020. But it's a healthier financial position than Trump in 2024. Or I forget who said it. It was yesterday, and therefore way beyond my memory capacity. But somebody, maybe it was Charlie Sykes. Are you surprised that the Davos people are going with Trump? Have you met these guys?
Yeah. No, I mean, I haven't, but someone else has, and they told me about them. And
all they care about tax breaks and less regulation. Yeah. And they think Republicans are more likely to give that to them, and they are correct. But even they haven't been giving a hand over fist to Trump.
Well, no, because
so
it doesn't result in anything.
In 2020, because incumbents usually win, I can understand that they really super-financed him.
Yeah,
and in 2024,
totally
not so
different.
much.
Right. He had every ability to leverage everything in 2020. He doesn't have that power in 2024. It doesn't really matter that Biden isn't doing as well. Biden isn't raising as much money legitimately as the biggest crook in the history of everything was able to leverage out of people while he was president a few years ago. That's not a great comparison. And
Right,
really,
so-
what matters other than what's happening right now? Where's your money?
And speaking of right now, here's more money. Let's talk about a money guy. His name, you may recognize the name,
Okay.
at least the last name.
I'll squint at it.
His name is Timothy
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Mellon.
Mellon. The guy from
Carnegie
Back
Mellon?
to School. Yeah. The real Mellons. Yeah, okay. Sure.
An heir to the Mellon banking dynasty, donated $10 million to
Me.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Oh.
Atop the $5 million he gave earlier in 2023. That a Mellon would have fondness for Kennedy is not in itself shocking. The moneyed families have connections going back generations.
That's crazy.
But what's worth some thought on the fact is that Mellon was also a major donor to Trump, having contributed $15 million to MAGA during 2023.
Oh. That's
So
not surprising, I
why
guess.
would he do that? Well, with polls showing Kennedy might siphon votes from Biden to Trump's benefit, and they usually are pretty iffy about that. And that's even assuming things stay the same, which they won't. It's enough to raise some real questions about the motivation behind the money. Do you think?
Yeah. I'm in agreement.
Okay, good. More money, but this time Senate.
Oh.
We could talk about money in terms of, well, the candidate, who's usually the big money vacuum, not doing so well. We talked about that. But and we talked about the individual parties in individual states like Michigan or Arizona, where they're sort of broke.
Yeah.
Now let's look at the Senate. Again, political playbook breaking this down, because I guess all the financials were due on January 31st.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Arizona, Carrie Lake ended 2023 with relatively little money in the bank. She raised $2 million, spent half of it.
All
That
right.
left her starting 2024 with a little over $1 million in the bank and $308,000 in debt.
Okay, so.
Sinema has almost
Pay that debt.
$11 million, and Ruben Gallego has almost $7 million.
Oh.
Again, Sinema's an incumbent, so even though nobody likes her and they're not giving her a lot of money, she started out with
they
a
gave it to her
flush
before.
cash.
It's
Cow.
still, if it's still there, it's still there. You know, what can I tell you? That counts as now money if it's still there.
Lake is set to headline a campaign fundraiser tomorrow, hosted by two wealthy QAnon supporters.
Hey, I didn't know there were such things.
Oh, yeah. And there's invitations and backstory on the donors. So I'll give that to you. That's the kind of thing that sort of interests you
It's
sometimes.
exciting. Find out who the lunatics are and how much money they have, and maybe we can scam them over the phone for a couple.
In
of
California,
What do you
baseball
think?
star Steve Garvey raised $600,000 in California Senate race. I think that's not a lot compared to what it costs to run a race in California.
No, not great, but okay.
Michigan,
Garvey.
Democratic Representative Lisa Slotkin. Compare Michigan to California. Lisa Slotkin
Let's
raised
do that.
$2.8 million
Oh,
and began the year with $6 million on hand, outraising her opponents by millions of dollars.
yes.
Peter Mayer, the Republican who sort of impeached Trump but then would vote for him anyway,
Yeah.
has just under $400,000 in hand, but he's got a fortune of his own to rely on if he wants to.
Well, that's good. Right, sure.
New Jersey.
Blow that.
You heard of New Jersey.
I have. It's
Indicted
wonderful.
Democratic Senator Bob
Just
Menendez.
say it that way. We don't have to own them. Yeah.
Raised just shy of $16,000
Oh,
and
well.
refunded all of it.
Oh. Yeah.
Meanwhile,
Okay.
First Lady Tammy Murphy raised $3.2 million, and Andy
Right.
Kim, same amount. Doubling the amount her chief rival for Democratic nomination, Andy Kim,
Oh,
putting
I
the
see.
two challengers on more or less equal footing, because Andy Kim had already raised a lot.
Okay, I get you.
Breaking it all down, Biden's money machine, Trump's legal bills, and other takeaways are a problem. So I just
Yes.
thought I would mention it. So on the money thing, if you're looking at, well,
Problem.
money wins
That's it.
races, well, the Republicans don't have it and Democrats do.
Okay, good. Then we should win and they should lose.
Right. So we should mention that.
We should
Now,
just start now. Yeah, okay.
let's look a little bit at, here's another one. The Republican National Committee's year-end filing reveals it had its worst fundraising year since 2013 in a decade
Okay.
in absolute dollars, and it's worse since 1993 in inflation-adjusted figures.
Oh. All right.
Do you know who
Good.
still has her job?
Yes, that person who runs it.
Yeah, Romney McDaniel.
Yeah. Well, we know Romneys. They're not great with money.
Well, how come she still has her job? I mean, there's a lot of people asking that on the Republican side.
Yes. Well, the answer to that is who wants it?
Well,
It's
the
up
other
for bid.
answer
Who
is
wants
who
that?
wants it?
Anybody?
Trump wants it
Nobody.
for her.
Yeah, right. He wants
And
her to
unless
stay
Trump
there.
says otherwise.
Right. Yeah.
So,
she keeps turning on the spigots
Republican
for him.
National Committee raised $87 million, spent $93 million, and had $8 million on hand and 1.8 in debt.
Why?
That's not a lot. They have to open up a credit line.
Okay. I give them no credit whatsoever.
I don't either. And so where's the money supposed to come from for a giant campaign? It's
Rich
not going to
people.
come from Trump and MAGA because
Well,
this
not
money's
that
all
much,
getting
guy.
sucked up for legal fees. It's not going to come from the Republican National Committee because they don't have any. It's not going to come from state organizations because they don't have any either. So where's this stuff supposed to come from? I'm just saying.
Where's that melon fellow? He was here just a minute ago. Come back. Where are you going? He's out the door. I need you to pay Stormy Daniel and Jean Carroll. He's gone. He's not paying.
Right.
I don't understand.
And just the other day,
Yes.
the day before they released these numbers, there was a big exclusive on Fox. First on Fox, Republican National Committee January fundraising best monthly haul in 2024 cycle.
What?
The RNC's December year-end figures must be atrocious, wrote Rob Pyers, if they're rushing out stories about their January haul to get ahead of the year-end figures being released. And then they released the figures, and Rob Pyers said,
Not great.
now
we know.
now we know.
Okay. Well, how much did they raise on January 6th? That's the important point.
That specific day.
Yes.
How many did they raise from January?
That's a good question, too. Well, they need to pay their legal bills, too.
Right. So Greg Sargent says, Trump's mind-blowing rants got me to thinking about how much of a bubble the American right lives in now, protected by an enormous propaganda machine. The right lives a world of profound untruth and invention. This is Simon Rosenberg speaking that Greg Sargent captured.
Okay.
But
I
it goes
see.
to what we
All
were
right.
talking about earlier in the week.
What were we doing?
The right-wing
know.
machine refuses to talk about bad news or facts.
Oh.
They won't tell their voters, listeners, readers, whatever, the truth about what's really going on. And S.V. Date, the one who wrote about the finance story for HuffPost, said, this is 100% correct. You go to a Trump rally, talk to the people waiting to get in, you'll be astonished at the stuff they believe.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. No kidding. I think that's been true since forever, but is it specifically with respect to finances as well, or just everything in general?
What's everything?
Yeah.
But the whole idea is they have no idea that he's spending legal fees, their money on legal fees. They have no idea that the legal fees that he's spending aren't helping him win his trials. Delay,
Neither
yes.
does
Win,
he.
no.
Yeah,
But they don't hear about any of this.
I guess that's true. And then if we were saying over the break, I noticed that this was circulating on social media, and I think there was a pop. Yeah, it's like one of the top diaries right now on Daily Kos. He had a press availability Trump did, and he just flatly denies that he lost any of these cases and is going to have to pay any penalties. He pretends he doesn't know what the reporter is talking about, and I imagine it's extremely easy. If he can do
I know
it,
what you're talking about. I won that election.
Then his supporters certainly can do it too. Although I would be surprised if his supporters and grassroots donors didn't think that their donations were helping him in his legal fights. They probably believe that they are helping him. I mean, I don't know that I think that's a great thing, but there should be a separation between the political money that he's raising and using it on court fees like that. But he's not going to do that. He's not going to separate the pots of money. He needs money over here. He takes it from that one. But a lot of those supporters probably have been solicited directly, with things saying, they're politicizing, they're using the Biden DOJ against me, help me fight back. So they probably are attuned to that. But, and it will only help them continue to ignore the reality when Trump himself, the day after these penalties are handed down, will have a press availability and say, "No, I didn't. They didn't find me. What are you talking about?" Yeah, delusional. I mean, needs memory care.
So let's talk about some polling that's been out this week, which is sort of interesting.
All right.
So gains for Biden since the last poll. He gained 5 points in the Quinnipiac poll. He's up 6 nationally. That's an outlier, but, the point is the trend. 3 points Morning Consult. Weekly track he gained. Biden did 2 points on Economist YouGov.
Okay.
He's above 2020 results in Michigan, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania. And as a matter of fact, there's a Franklin and Marshall, Pennsylvania poll out this morning. Biden 43, Trump 42, Bob Casey 47, McCormick 35, who keeps losing ground. David McCormick, the Connecticut carpetbagger, who's running for senator in Pennsylvania again.
Okay.
I think Ramaswamy beat him for the nom.
Oh. Well, Franklin and Marshall poll, okay. That's Amish country.
Or not
They do
Ramaswamy,
that,
who beat him for the nom.
I was going to say Ramaswamy. That's a
guy.
surprise for me. Okay. What are we talking about? Pennsylvania? Senate? Or you mean Dr. Oz?
Dr. Oz.
Oh, okay.
There you go. The other carpetbagger.
Oh, jeez.
I can't keep my carpetbagger straight.
Okay. I was going to say Ramaswamy. Where is? I don't even know where he's from, but okay, sure. Maybe
he wants to be vice president. As a matter of fact, some national polls say that he's the top choice for vice president for MAGA.
Oh, yeah, great. I heard
stripping Haley by a lot and DeSantis by a little.
What about Robert F.
In any
Kennedy
case, Franklin
Jr.?
Marshall College, Pennsylvania, Biden 43, Trump 42. In the Senate, Casey 47, McCormick 35. So that's pretty good.
That's
Stu Rothenberg notes Mark Zandi, who's finance guy.
Zandi, okay.
Zandi, our newly released Moody's analytic. He's the chief predictor, chief
CPO.
knucklebones reader for Moody's.
For who now?
Moody's.
Oh, okay. All right. Zandi.
Mark Zandi.
Tell us, Zandi.
Economist. Our newly released Moody's Analytics selection model predicts Biden will win re-election by a thin margin with an average voter turnout. Read the full analysis here, and he gives the link.
I mean, all right. That's a safe prediction.
He's got some weird stuff in it.
Oh.
Biden winning North Carolina, but losing Arizona, for example.
Huh.
Biden winning Pennsylvania, but Pennsylvania being the closest of the races. Wisconsin, a bigger win than Minnesota, and then Pennsylvania the closest. Winning Georgia, winning Nevada, sort of interesting.
Yeah.
And Stu Rothenberg, who's actually good at this.
Yeah.
As opposed to Sandy, who does finances, not politics.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Says, I really like Sandy when he talks to the economy. Not so thrilled with him as a political handicapper, but that said, they may be right.
Overall, certainly,
Overall,
wins
so
on a narrow margin. Okay, I buy that.
So narrow margin Biden win, however you put the states together.
Okay.
So that was also sort of interesting. So again, that's where the state of the race is. You pick up a poll and say, look, I don't understand you people. Biden is doing terribly. Look at this weird poll you never heard of with non-clear ways of doing polling that shows Biden losing by 10 points in all the swing states. He's doing terrible. Well, you have this other poll over here saying he's actually winning. Mm-hmm. There's 2 polls that show him winning Pennsylvania by various amounts, by good people.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but it looks. I get a narrative here. And the narrative is Biden is doing terribly in the polls. So G. Elliott Morris, again, the guy who now runs 538, said, cool your jets with the poll stuff. It's just still too early. But by the way, if you're looking at the aggregate here, which is the way you should really look at polls, Trump's up by 2 points. That's not a lot. It's like practically a tie.
Yes.
So, Biden's doing terribly and doomed to lose. No, that's not what the polls say at all. And by the way, G. Elliott Morris shows the fluctuation of polls between now and when the actual election is historically is pretty large.
Yeah, that's certainly true. That's
so, don't freak out about the polls. It doesn't matter what poll you see.
Yeah. I mean, at bottom, the only thing people are upset about, even in saying that Biden's winning,
he should be winning by 72.
Yeah, well, he should, because the other guy is under 50,000
But his people don't know about that.
And they don't care. So
they might. Some of them might. When you start to let them know, that's what campaigns are for, and that's why campaigns actually matter, and they shift
That's right.
how people think and vote.
And you have to wait. A lot of those people said if he's convicted, and you have to wait until that happens. And some of that might not happen until after.
It's too early. I don't really want to look at it right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's upsetting that that people even consider Trump to be in competition, but he is. There's people who ignore stuff for partisan reasons. What can you do?
Right. So Simon Rosenberg's summary just yesterday.
Okay.
Quinnipiac, Biden up 50-44 plus 6. Economist YouGov, Biden up 43-42. Morning Consult, weekly track is Biden gaining 3 points this week. Moody's forecast a Biden win. It's a close, competitive election. Remember, that's what I said.
Mm-hmm.
The point of going over this is not to convince you Biden's winning in a landslide. It's a close, competitive election. Biden has an edge. And by the way, he's the incumbent, and incumbents rarely lose. Yes, G.W. Bush, G.H.W. Bush, but he earned it. So keep calm, carry on, and mind
what else
the
you
gap.
got to do? All right, yeah, you don't have much choice, but yeah, we can freak out about things along the way. That's what we do.
So the money's coming in. We're winning the money race. That's clear.
Hooray!
We're tied in the popular opinion race.
Yay!
Trump's campaign is surprisingly good because Susie Wiles is running it.
Oh. Okay.
And I think that Ron DeSantis probably rused the day he said she stinks and you're fired or whatever. And Susie Wiles said, well, we beat you like a drum in the primary and you deserve every moment of it. But she's good. And so he's going to have a competent campaign. They're doing the right things in the right places. They're squeezing out DeSantis. Now they're squeezing out Haley. And yet Haley continues to run. Haley continues to highlight his legal issues, pointing out that when juries decide things, it's legitimate.
Maybe.
Which is one of the reasons why Trump wants her out of the race, so she doesn't say things that reporters will pick up on and ask him about.
Okay.
And, she's in it for now because she hasn't left. And by the way, yesterday was the day Engoron promised to give us the ruling on the civil case in New York, so I expect it, this week.
Well, it's hard to...
Judges are what judges are.
That's really it. They do what they do, and there's not many people that can come down on a judge and make them feel bad about missing a deadline. They can make you feel bad.
Other judges, but they don't usually do it about deadlines.
Right. Judges are tough on deadlines for the lawyers who are arguing in front of them, but that's a power dynamic for you. All right. Well, so Susie Wiles excited about taking on Taylor Swift, or wishes that wasn't on her plate?
Don't say Tay.
Yeah.
Now that has to be one of the stupidest things ever.
I would. Yes, I would.
So
have
she's
to say
probably in the back room there trying to talk him out of it.
Why are we doing this? I wonder. Yeah. There's some chance she's a Taylor Swift fan, or her kids. Well,
Mother Jones is a really interesting twist on this.
Mother Jones. Okay.
Yeah. David Korn.
All right, David. Come on in.
And he basically says why the right-wing conspiracy theory about Taylor Swift is good for American democracy.
I don't want to hear it. All right, yeah, all right. Tell me what's the twist. He's kidding, right?
The twist is, remember the theme here. Right-wing people don't hear about actual news.
Right.
But this is showing Swifties, at least, and others, that crazy conspiracism is fundamental for MAGA land.
Okay.
So teaching them that is a good thing.
I guess that's true. Have they talked with the K-pop kids?
Oh, well, you want to know what else? I got you got a half hour?
Yes.
I'll tell you.
You don't.
If you all the other
could,
things
if you want it. Yeah, okay.
Esvidate, you should hear the things they believe when you go to these Trump rallies. Let's put it out there. Let's say, this is what I believe. This is funding Carrie Lake. Well, let's talk about it.
There's at least 5 people that have YouTube channels with nothing but. I went to a Trump rally and asked, what color is the sky? And
go watch these. Do your own research.
Yeah. Yes, that's the key phrase. True. Yeah. Now I'm thinking about the Taylor Swift thing, and they have a nickname, Swifties, and whatnot. I'm wondering, maybe they're the same people, but have they talked to the K-pop kids? Didn't the K-pop fans deal some sort of death blow to Republicans at some point over social media over something? I forget what it was. But I suppose if they can organize and strike back, Swift fans.
His point is that Taylor Swift is so popular, Michael Jackson, Muhammad Ali level popular, that
targeting
her is the theme of the article. Targeting her shows a wide audience how extreme and lunatic the conservative movement can be.
Yeah.
That's important to do because they don't usually hear it. They're in their own bubbles. They get propped up by other people who say, well, of course, that's just fact.
Mm-hmm.
That's just science, man.
Yeah, right.
But if regular, normal people start to hear about this stuff,
yeah,
then it's like, you guys are crazy.
They're going to be there when they find out. You mean I'm like literally not welcome to be a Trump supporter if I also like Taylor Swift
or the Kansas City Chiefs or football.
Oh, well, yeah, or Bud Light or.
I mean, this is what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Get this out there in a wide range. Yeah, no, not every single person is going to be convinced by this. That's not the point.
No, but
remember, we already
a few
posited that this is going to be a close election. So peel off 5%, 10%. You combine I'm supposed to hate football and I'm supposed to hate Taylor Swift and I'm supposed to hate Bud Light. And what are you talking about?
They were
why? I can't even remember why Bud Light
the whole
anymore.
NFL.
But like Taylor Swift, what are you talking about? I like Taylor Swift.
Yeah, I mean, I look.
And did you hear about Dobbs?
Dobbs. oh, that Dobbs. Yeah, I'm like Lou Dobbs. What now? Oh, yeah. Okay. True. Yes. I mean, if they've heard about that, they would have been switched on with this for some time. But yeah, it's true. There will be enough. There could be a critical number of people who say, well, I know. I mean, if I have to choose between the two, I'm sticking with Taylor Swift. I just am. Sorry.
No, as David Corn says, claiming Obama was born in Kenya was one thing. Alleging that Swift is a puppet of the deep state being manipulated by its denizens, that's quite another.
Yes, of course she is. Don't you know? Yeah, but I mean, there's a number of reasons that'll wake people up to that. But not the least of which will be none of this. Not only do I not want to, if I have to choose, am I going to choose Taylor Swift? But I mean, what are you talking about? The terminology, that's another thing I think turns off a lot of the normies too, is if you just give them unfiltered MAGA conspiracy chat from online, they just don't know what language they're speaking. I've never heard of any of the things you're saying. They don't make sense to me. And, of course, the idea, well, George Soros is what, bribing Taylor Swift? I think Taylor Swift has more money than George Soros at this point.
Probably.
So, I don't know. But, yeah, and of course, this is one of the better lines. For Trump to say, I'm more popular than Taylor Swift. That's going to go over big.
Right. And then final piece for today, this is from the Bulwark. This is Will Salatin writing. Nikki Haley just can't quit Trump. She claims to speak hard truths, but when it comes to the former president, she speaks mush. Yes. Basically, as a politician, and again, she's a skilled politician.
She's
not the most skilled in our generation, but she's good at politics. That's how she got elected in South Carolina. She's trying to convince anti-Trump people, she's one of them, by saying bad things about, jury trials and that juries are fair and that he got convicted and that's the way it goes.
They say good things
and
about jury trials.
She's trying to convince pro-Trump people, she's one of them, because I won't say anything bad about him and I'm still running for vice president.
Right.
So she's trying to have it both ways. Like our old congressman, both ways, Chris Shays.
Yeah.
And it's not working, but she's trying.
No.
In the week since, he writes, New Hampshire primary, Nikki Haley has sharpened her criticism of Trump. On Monday, she was asked why. In an interview with Haley, CNBC's Andrew Ross Sorkin pointed out that for months, Chris Christie had spoken bluntly, but Haley hadn't. Now, she's going after Trump. Why? And Haley had a simple answer. When the Republican field was full of candidates, it didn't make sense. I had others I had to get out of the way. Now it's a two-person race, and now I'm telling the truth. It was a classic Haley moment, exposing her habit of selective candor.
Yeah.
Contrary to what she tells audiences, I've always spoken in hard truths. Haley got where she is by not telling the truth.
Yeah.
Now she says she'll be straight with us, but she won't. Haley's doing what she's always done, ducking and hedging to keep her options open.
Yes.
Like, we saw it on display with the slavery and the Civil War thing.
It was done again today. There's another one.
Yeah? What'd you do today?
Today I saw people complaining on social media. I'll have to go back and grab it. I guess she was asked about the border situation, and the Texas rhetoric and all the Republican governors saying they were supporting Texas. And she said, somebody had commented online saying that she's of two minds here. She wants desperately to say the crazy stuff that wins her Trump supporters, but she also wants to look reasonable so that she can retain never Trumpers. And so her position on this was, well, Texas can secede if it wants to, but it won't because, they're sensible people and that's not what they're aiming at. But if they wanted to secede, they could. So there's something for everyone in that one. No, there's nothing for anyone in that. It's garbage, and everybody should reject her.
So Salatin says, look, Haley's trying what Nick Cataggio calls the half-Liz, the partial adoption of Liz Cheney's honesty about Trump. Yesterday in the Bulwark, Jonathan B. Last argued that Haley can't be trusted. I agree, but I'd add one thing. Haley's maneuver, is consistent with what she's done all along, criticizing Trump by design in ways that can be interpreted charitably to the former president. She never commits to a version that would squarely disqualify him. What she's doing isn't just a half Liz, it's a full Nikki.
Okay, well, I wouldn't name it after.
Right.
It doesn't
she says all these things, and it isn't that these make him unfit for office, it's that they're distracting, they're tiresome.
Yes.
The real problem with Trump's speech, she argued, was he talked about himself, and at no point did he talk about the American people. But she doesn't reject Trump. And then if you ask, I have no personal issues with Donald Trump. I have no problems with him. Mm-hmm. You don't have to leave him to move on from him. In other words, sure, I'd vote for him, and I'd accept the vice presidential candidacy in a heartbeat.
Right. And by the way, I reject you right at the point where you say, I have no personal problem with Trump. I have a tremendous one, and I can't talk to people who don't.
Yeah, and besides, whatever you say about Trump, Biden has his own issues and he's no better. So let's unite and take back the country.
All right.
That's what she told Hugh Hewitt. So basically, she's a lying liar.
I guess so. He's like 90 plus indictments, fewer than Trump. So, yeah, that's pretty awful. And
but that's okay.
South Carolina grows them, I guess.
So that she opens the eyes to voters who are now willing to listen about Taylor Swift or vice versa. Same thing. You're right in the same place.
Okay. Well, how about we talk about it again next week?
Let's do that.
All right. That's what we're forced to. All right. Welcome back now to the Kagro Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. What's the name of the show again? I don't know. I was right in the middle of saying that. I need to just do that on autopilot. Every once in a while, you have this weird thought occur to you in the middle of the sentence, like, do I need to say this again, or is this just, it's probably best just to get yourself restarted to say that phrase by rote and let nothing get in your way. The minute I give it even a passing thought, I flub the line. All right. Well, anyway, many more stories to cover here. We got plenty to get around to, many things parked here. Here's a story that has nothing to do with anything that we've discussed so far, but is certainly right up our alley in terms of things we've covered in the past on the show. I guess that doesn't quite qualify as gun fail per se, but it's certainly in the neighborhood. This one being circulated via social media by Radley Balco, whom everyone knows and appreciates, noting for the record this boingboing.net story, which is crazy enough on its own, but just in case all of this additional insight isn't available in the article, we'll long story short it via Radley Balco. Some students went to the Indiana State House recently to discuss school shootings. They're against them. And a GOP state representative, who is, of course, A, from the GOP, and B, therefore, in favor of school shootings. It just comes down to that, sorry. A GOP state rep flashed his gun at them. So the kids have come to say, we're being traumatized by too many shootings in school. We're coming here to this safe place of the Indiana State House to petition our government for redress of grievances. And the GOP guy thinks that the great idea is to scare them with a gun. Now, as it happens, Radley offers to us, and I don't know whether it's in the article or not, that the same guy, the same representative that flashed the gun at him, has quoted Goebbels, for one thing, posted racist stuff to social media, and has said that Uvalde, the shooting in Uvalde, Texas, was a hoax. That's a new one. Everything's a hoax eventually, I guess. But what a fun guy. Oh, and by the way, he's also currently on probation for a DWI and armed. But, hey, who could be bothered with the technicalities? Now I'm interested in seeing the boingboing.net coverage of it. And by the way, if you thought that was a serious issue, wait till you find out it's being covered in boingboing.net. That'll give you all the reassurance. It's a serious enough place, and they really do have journalists and everything, but it's a little weird. Jason Weisberger, who should not be derided for working for the venerated boingboing.net, reports this under that headline: Indiana State Rep threatens student with his gun. And then very seriously, I enjoy this. Illustrates the piece with a gif of Yosemite Sam blasting up the Western Saloon that he's in. And really, that's the way you ought to be treating it. I'm not saying that he's diminishing the seriousness here. He's just doing it in an online way, consistent with publishing it. Boing, boing, boing. Don't I have that sound effect here somewhere? Let's see. I think I used that for a one of the censorship noises that I had here. Oh, where did I must have parked it on the desktop and not in my soundboard. No, that's a different one. Not boring, but boing. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, it's not in the okay, let's get to the story, shall we? Indiana State Representative, if you wanted to know the name of this wackadoodle, is Jim Lucas, a Republican, flashed his gun at a student looking to discuss the elimination of school shootings. It's a good thing that they didn't come to him saying we want to do something about perverts and groomers. What would he have flashed at them then? This particular lunatic, Lucas, opened his jacket specifically to show off his firearm as students visiting the state capitol expressed their concerns about gun violence. That is just so interesting. We're here not to ban guns, but to say gun violence against students in schools is a bad thing, which presumably he carries a gun because he does think, he likes to tell people in public, I'm sure, that I carry a weapon so that I can be the good guy with a gun that prevents violence against innocents like children in our schools. But actually, I'm so far gone that anybody who comes and says, I don't like it when kids are shot, is a gun grabber. So I better show them my gun, which is weird because then they'll grab it. But anyway, that's he hasn't thought that one all the way through. Jim Lucas is his name. So there you go. He must be aware that this is a threatening move, of course, because he's seen it in the movies. I want to talk to you about gun violence. Oh yeah, well, I love gun violence. Look, here's the proof. I have a gun. What's the subtext of this supposed to be? So he has to be aware it's a threatening move, and the students were terrorized. A conversation resulted between Lucas and a 17-year-old McKenna, maybe? McKenna. This is an interesting, everywhere, though. The first name, the last name. McKenna Five Coats. How do you like that? McKynna. McKenna is my best guess at the pronunciation. I wouldn't be surprised if it had some other pronunciation that doesn't occur to me. But, that's close enough to a name that I figured out. All right. But five coats is interesting, too. And I'm wondering what that origin is. Maybe even Native American, possible. I don't know. Imposed on them, anglicizing perhaps an actual familial name, but maybe not. I don't know. I've not run into that one. But anyway, congratulations to you for having the courage to go and speak to your state legislators, McKenna, and then finding out, of course, that one of them was a total lunatic. I'm glad you made it through. I hope you're okay. Anyway, Five Coats, it says, did a fantastic job of standing her ground against an adult, reputed authority figure threatening gun violence. That's remarkable. So congratulations to you, even if I mangled the reading of the story. Afterwards, she described the event. And I guess this comes from a quote that Boing Boing is taking from where? I don't know. They've grabbed their quote from Raw Story, which has grabbed it from somewhere else, I am sure. But anyway, Five Coats later told the outlet that the moment really shook her to the core. My heart sank to my stomach, Five Coats said. I genuinely felt very unsafe in that moment, and I really just wanted the conversation to kind of end after that. Lucas made light of the interaction when he was reached by the outlet, I guess whoever Raw Story was quoting, I think, saying that he was simply showing an inanimate object to explain his defense of guns. I was merely showing I don't know if what I showed the people who came here to protest against flashers is an inanimate object. I mean, it's attached. It's not animate in its own right, although some people say it is. But okay, never mind. Anyway, I love that one. I'm just showing an inanimate object. Okay. I mean, that's pretty weird because people get shot all the time for showing inanimate objects that turn out to be cell phones, for instance, or don't exist at all, but later show up in their hands after they're, killed for having looked like they might have had an inanimate object in their hands. But anyway, people that want to have adult conversations, he says, I think need to be able to handle adult situations, he told the outlet, which again sounds like he flashed something else. But anyway, I guess be on the lookout for pervert, groomer, gun lunatic, maybe, allegedly, all of those things. Jim Lucas, who also is, apparently a habitual drunk driver as well. But hey, who am I to judge? Okay. I mean, look, there's nothing I can do about it. I don't live in Indiana. But just wanted to bring that one to your attention because I thought it was interesting and weird. And then I wanted to credit Radley Balco for having done this other research. Yeah, as it turns out, that information is not in the boingboing.net coverage there, but valuable information to have nonetheless. And I probably stuff floating around in the head of Radley Balco as a result of his varying the coverage of various stories over the years. I don't know whether he just went out and researched the guy. Sounds like the sort of thing he might have bumped into Jim Lucas over certain weirdo issues in the past. Okay, so let's see other things to share with you. This I thought was an interesting take when I parked it here yesterday. So let's see if we agree with my flash assessment yesterday. Heading back to the border issue, the one I told you about that Nikki Haley was hedging on just the other day. Abbott's belligerence on the border, it is herein theorized, is designed to obscure his culpability. This, a piece from just the other day, January 28th, and where are we reading? Deceleration News. This, an important view here. I don't know if we can read all the way through it or not. Something I've discussed in passing in the past, mostly because when College Boy number one was doing a very interesting research paper on climate-related migration, and just pointing out that record numbers of migrants heading towards the United States were moving out of places from which they had been displaced by climatological catastrophe. And that it was essentially, it wasn't so much a matter of, well, I think I'll do relatively better in the United States than I'm doing here, or I just want to invade the United States and replace white people, or whatever might be motivating them in the minds of Republicans, thinking that that's what they're doing. But rather, I'm going to die if I stay here, and there's no real opportunity for me in another part of this country either, so I might as well make my way to the United States. One of the few places that you can still, and I mean, see, this should be a point of Republican pride, you would think. One of the few places in this hemisphere, the Western Hemisphere, that I can, A, get to by foot because I have no other means of transportation available to me, and two, where I stand a chance despite it all and despite their insistence that they're going to make life difficult for me, I might actually be able to eke out a living. Here, I cannot. It's not working anymore. I used to be living on farmland. It is now non-arable due to climate collapse, and I got to go somewhere to live. And this is about that fact. But I was very interested in it when my son was doing research on it, because it became pretty obvious at that moment, since we were still in the throes of the Trump administration, and they were still saying, we're going to build a wall, we're going to stop immigration cold, nobody should get in. And it basically, without saying so outright, now people are, of course, saying it outright, they were saying, we're legitimately going to have to come to the point where, look, these people are going to die if they stay where they are, and they might die if they try to risk the wrath of Trump and his minions and cross over into the United States. So which one do you go with on balance? You go with the might die. That's the answer. And the reality was that Trump and his minions were saying, we're going to have to, eventually it's going to have to come down to this. They will die of dehydration, starvation on the other side of the wall. So they'll do anything to get here. But we're going to have to shoot them and kill them at the border in massive numbers, by the millions, or else concede that we can't control this thing and do that thing that we've pledged we are not going to do, let people in. So we're looking at a border genocide in the making, unless they just bend. And I mean, thankfully, the truth is they can't stem this tide. They can't build this wall. They can't defend this border this way. But they'll make people miserable and probably kill a bunch of them along the way. So hopefully it never reaches those levels. Anyway, this, I think, touches on the underlying problem here. This particular piece from Deceleration News. Record levels of forced migration are tied to a climate crisis that Governor Greg Abbott helped shepherd into existence, making a pretty important point about somebody. It's not just that he's the governor of a border state. It's not just that he's the Republican governor of a border state. He's the Republican governor of a border state that is all in the tank, so to speak, wink, wink, for gas and oil interests as well, and also is a lunatic on the border. So Greg Harmon pointing this out for Deceleration News, beginning with, let's see, a quote from someone, I guess a migrant from Haiti, pointing out, it's just quoted here as Jeftani, maybe? Jeffthanie, just identified by that name, from Haiti, saying, "These weeks, I'm hearing people around me say that it looks like the sun is getting closer to Haiti. The heat is unbearable, yet we know that the sun stays in its place. It is shade that becomes a privilege." That's actually quite eloquent statement. This is from an advocacy brief called In Our Worlds, Voices of Women of African Descent for Reproductive and Climate Justice. So that's going a little bit further abroad from the theme of this piece, but I guess she must have been quoted in that advocacy brief, but very poetic, really. Shade that becomes a privilege. Okay, now on to the article itself. Earlier this month, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas took to MSNBC to discuss the border crisis. Now, of course, he's being impeached for it. As video of the unprecedented press of refugees and migrants at Eagle Pass, Texas, flashed on the screen, he was asked what was behind the record-setting surge of desperate humanity at the border. He stressed three intersecting forces: climate, poverty, and rising authoritarianism. We are seeing the greatest number of displaced people, not only at our southern border, not only in the Western Hemisphere, but across the globe, Mayorkas said. Don't forget that this is an issue in all over Africa, the Middle East, Mediterranean countries, Europe, etc. It's true. More than 110 million people, the most ever recorded, were considered forcibly displaced in 2023 by conflict, persecution, discrimination, violence, and climate change, according to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. Saying so didn't sit well, by the way, with Governor Greg Abbott, who blasted Mayorkas on Twitter, saying, "Climate change, Mayorkas is pathetic. even though he's right. If he sounded a little sensitive, there's a reason for it. And let's see. There is it's hard to tell how they've formatted things here. So we've got bigger type that's now centered, but it's above a photograph of Greg Abbott. And I think it's probably a point that he makes later in the body of the article. But if not, I want to call it out. It's important. Abbott entered Texas politics waging a war on the most vulnerable people on the planet by fighting efforts to reduce the United States' contribution to rapidly accelerating global warming. Warming that year after year has expressed itself in worsening weather disasters, displacing tens of millions of people from their homes. So, yeah, interesting. So now back to the flow of the article. If Abbott sounds a little sensitive, there's a reason for it. Last year, more than 12,000 people perished around the world in floods, storms, and wildfires, according to the international nonprofit Save the Children. That's an uptick of 30% over the previous year. In the United States, there was a record-shattering $93 billion in damage caused by weather-driven disasters. Over the last 20 years, billion-dollar climate-related disasters have dramatically expanded, from a handful each year in the 1990s to 10 or more in the 2000s to last year's dozens. Although that also has to do with the cost of the repairs going up as well, but that too may also be climate-driven in some ways. These mega disasters have struck even as the scientific community ratcheted up its warnings about the course we are on, and as elected leaders like Abbott worked to slow or stop federal action intended to dampen the devastation. Discussing root causes presents a dangerous distraction from the only story he, Abbott, wants us discussing, his beef with President Biden. To keep us from debating actual solutions to the surge, he's willing to go against the U.S. Supreme Court, the most conservative court in nearly 100 years, by the way, which still defers to the constitutional primacy of the federal government in matters of the border and immigration. To do otherwise risks exposing his own contribution to the crisis. Abbott's culpability is encapsulated in his brag a decade ago during his time as Texas Attorney General. I go into the office, I sue the federal government, and I go home. That's his brag. Many of those lawsuits targeted U.S. Environmental Protection Agency efforts to regulate air pollution, contributing to the climactic chaos that we're experiencing today. For those who need reminding, 2023 was the hottest year to date. It always is. Not only in Texas, but the hottest that the planet Earth has experienced in at least 120,000 years. The second hottest year on record was only a few years before that, and the hottest 10 years measured since modern record keeping began. That's right, all within the last decade. You see the pattern, obviously. Moving into 2024, all arrows point to another record breaker. The world didn't need to be like this, but efforts like those of Abbott and others to undermine climate action have a supportive audience. Climate conspiracies seep through the pores of the internet in spite of promises from big tech tycoons to regulate disinformation. Yet the science behind this global cooking is deceptively simple. And here, another one of those enlarged pull quotes here. Every year we wrench massive amounts of carbon from the ground in the form of coal, oil, gas, crushing and incinerating those substances to create energy. We then shunt the wastes, the carbon dioxide, methane, and other heat-trapping gases, into the atmosphere with predictable consequences. The basic science behind this artificial warming and overheating the planet has been understood for more than 100 years, such that policymakers who have worked to undermine action have a lot of explaining to do. Most people today know that the weather events they're experiencing are both unprecedented and unnatural. More than 70% of those surveyed in Texas last fall said that they both understand global warming is happening and believe that the gases contributing to it should be regulated as pollutants. Remember, that's more than 70% of those surveyed in Texas. Next time we think about, well, sure, let Texas secede because screw them anyway. I know the temptation is there. Or let's exclude them from the union. Or let's stop sending federal money there. 70% of the population knows what's going on. Roughly half told the surveyors with the Yale program on climate change communication that they have personally suffered from global warming's impacts. Why don't they vote like it? Oh, there's reasons, including manipulation of the voting population, of course. In short, the rejection of climate science intended to score political points on behalf of fossil fuel billionaires, the brand of denialism marking Abbott's entire political life, is unraveling. Denying the warming of the planet that we're all experiencing smacks today of lunacy. So, to help protect the most heavily subsidized industry on the planet, is this say $13 million per minute for fossil fuels, according to the International Monetary Fund? Wow. Abbott and company need a new form of denialism. A recent report by the Center for Countering Digital Hate, CCDH, marks the rise of what it calls new denial. Instead of arguing the heat we all feel is not real, as the fossil fuel industry and related trade groups and think tanks have done for decades, today's deniers are instead trying to convince voters that the climate solutions won't work. If you've found yourself logging off social media lately, mired in depression, feeling as if there's no solution to the fix we're in, likely you have been caught up in one of these new denial claims. CCDH researchers reviewed 4,458 hours of YouTube video content posted between 2018 and 2023. They found that old denial arguments, including claims that the Earth isn't getting hotter, have dropped from 65% of all claims to only 30%. So-called new denial claims that suggest, for instance, that the solution is worse than the problem itself now make up 70% of all detractor arguments. That's an interesting shift. Attacks on climate solutions in particular have leapt by more than 21 points. The reality, however, is that there is a world of solutions, many underway and others waiting for us to activate. If this generation and the ones hoping to follow it, that's interesting, hoping to follow it, are to have a chance, we have got to take this project up honestly. Another pull quote here. Crafting solutions requires shaking off the paralyzing sludge of industry disinformation campaigns and seeing these challenges with clear eyes. Instead of demonizing climate's victims, we must demand policy changes that protect all people wherever they live. Even if they choose to live here, by the way. Demands made under the current and previous administration that migrants and refugees remain in Mexico while struggling to secure a court hearing to present their asylum claims, have contributed to tent cities with no place to hide from the biting punishments of extreme weather. Unfortunately, with Abbott, the cruelty is the message. His inhumanity roared to the surface recently when he was caught lamenting the failure of his coercive violence against migrants. The failure of that violence. Talk radio host Dana Loesch asked him on January 5th, wink, wink, what was the maximum amount of pressure he could apply to the situation before running afoul of federal law. Abbott responded that he was doing everything but, quote, shooting migrants. He was talking to Dana Loesch, who's is she still with the NRA? She was the big NRA spokesperson for a while. Doing everything but shooting migrants and refugees at the border because, he said, of course, the Biden administration would charge us with murder, and that would be because it would be murder. And it's true. The assault on humanity at the border is profound. To start, Operation Lone Star, remember that's what he's calling it, is intended to keep refugees and migrants from crossing the border to make their asylum claims, which is their right under both 1948's Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the Refugee Convention of 1951, which we ratified thinking wouldn't apply to us, I guess. But then, at Eagle Pass, oversized buoys have been placed in the river with serrated metal plates between and underlain by submerged netting. Beyond that, miles of razor wire. For those who brave all of this, some oftentimes with children in tow, there are frequently staged arrests after agents lead migrants onto private property in order to lock them up on misdemeanor trespassing charges. Now he has demonstrated a willingness to stoke domestic violence by stoking those conspiracy-minded who believe, as he insists, this humanitarian crisis is actually an orchestrated invasion. They love that language. More on that perhaps later. Let's read what we can before heading out for the break. Undoubtedly, it is an untenable situation, but to begin to fix it, we need to understand what is actually behind it. People just don't leave their homes and families and communities because the United States left the back door unlocked somewhere. They undertake desperate voyages because their lives at home have become unbearable. After Mexico, most of the families arriving at the border this month, and there are nearly half our family units that arrive there, have been from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, Central America's so-called Northern Triangle. Let's catch up with what's going on there that's driving migration after this. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Spit it out. Just get it done. Right, okay. Many things, as just more stuff piling up as you people who I follow on social media just continue to produce good material on so many interesting things. And there's just so many hours in the day. And one of these days we'll have to get back to the original idea behind this whole thing, this whole streaming content thing where we could just stay on the air all day or get on as events happen and do live coverage of things. But, well, it would play havoc with Netroots Radio, of course. I suppose we could stream, additional content elsewhere. There's any number of these platforms that we distribute the podcast on actually offer the opportunity to do streaming, but I kind of like the idea of being part of a full day's scheduled programming, radio style. And of course, then I'd like to get on with my life after 11 o'clock if I can from time to time. But sometimes there's just not enough hours in the day to share all this material. But anyway, I digress. I want to go back to the very important connection between climate change and migration. I mean, it makes intuitive sense, and it's not something you have to reason out. It's quite obvious if you gather enough facts about what's happening in Central America and why people are taking up this dangerous migration. But of course, Republicans deny both parts of this, so it's difficult for them to make this connection, I guess. So I guess it stands for us to do it and point out the realities. So we left off by saying that, it's an untenable situation, and in order to even begin to approach some sort of solution, we got to acknowledge what's happening. First, that most of the families arriving at the border this month are from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, the so-called Northern Triangle of Central America. It is, the article continues, an area that's been severely stressed by extreme weather events and rising temperatures linked to global warming. A recent study by researchers at the University of Texas, at Austin, And I guess now Greg Abbott can ban them from doing this research. And the University of Utah, though, which would have to be banned by their own governor, I guess, found a definite correlation between dry growing seasons in the Northern Triangle and emigration to the United States of more than 70%, even after controlling for factors like criminal violence, another reason to leave, and poverty. Itself a reason to leave, but probably driven by the fact that I can't raise food to eat for myself or sell. That will drive poverty and likely drive people into criminality as well, even if inadvertently. In other words, love him or hate him, Mayorkas is right to highlight climate. It gets far too little attention, which does little for developing strategies to ultimately solve the intersecting crises. And here, I guess I'll say this. Here's my call to action. Not that anybody listening to this show needed a reason to oppose the impeachment of Mayorkas, but rather to affirmatively rally to his support. He's, I guess, the only person of importance in the position so far to have made this connection. And it is an obvious connection, but it's one that I think is ripe for Republican and particularly MAGA Republican sniping. Oh, he's crazy. He's sitting here. We're impeaching him about the migrant crisis. He's telling us about climate change, which we also deny is a real problem. Well, they really do go hand in hand, and it is actually not hard to see the connectivity unless you're willfully blind to it. And many of them are exactly that. So, but, you know, in addition to opposing the impeachment because it's baseless and stupid, we ought to be out there saying not only should we not be impeaching him, if there was any way to be acknowledging the importance of having him in this role. I mean, yeah, there are certainly, I'm sure, immigration advocates who are unhappy with Mayorkas because we are politically forced into this situation of having to appear tough on the border and enforce the laws and to deport people back to disaster. But I think at the very least, even if you don't want to necessarily support Mayorkas, you should at least be saying, well, it's absolutely true that there is connectivity between these two issues, even if we do or don't like Mayorkas particularly on a personal level. But if you do, you got twice the reason. Anyway, I just wanted to point that out. More about the issue than the personality involved, to be sure. Consider, it says next, the unraveling of Venezuela and the stunning 7.7 million refugees and migrants streaming out of the country in recent years. Republicans will point to that and say, well, that's because of the government there. People are fleeing the government because it's so oppressive and horrific and socialistic. And may or may not be true, but guess what? There's something else going on here. This story is most often reported as a political one, with reporters highlighting state corruption or an economic over-reliance on oil. Rarely factored in is the contribution of years of extreme drought, rising seas, and other devastating climate impacts punishing the Venezuelan people who recently suffered their worst drought in at least 40 years. The USDA's own assessment of Venezuela's food security in 2022 didn't mention drought or climate. Instead, it limits blame to anti-market policies, political turmoil, decline in the country's oil industry, and hyperinflation, all of which no doubt helped to drive it. But why exclude climate? No one knows. Well, we have some ideas. Researchers with Humanitarian Practice Networks, however, wrote around the same time that mounting evidence suggests that Venezuela is experiencing accelerating chronic climate shocks and stresses, some of which are factored into people's calculations of whether to stay or leave. In Haiti, where lives have also teetered on the brink of anarchy, sending tens of thousands to seek shelter in the United States in recent years, the disequilibrium is not merely political. Global climatic forces and local survival strategies that can compound the impact of storms and floods both contribute to that instability, according to UNICEF. It's an incredible injustice to our children to leave behind a world that is worse than the one we inherited, let alone one that threatens to be increasingly uninhabitable by humans, writes Imran Ahmed, CEO of the Center for Countering Digital Hate. Remember them? Another path is still possible. In much the same way that Texas has leapt ahead of most others in wind and solar energy production, and could be a global leader, as Time magazine pointed out recently, there is a huge opportunity here for that state. We could choose to tackle the climate crisis and related opportunities as a partner with the world to our south. Abbott has decided instead to declare war on them, because I guess war just sells a lot better to his audience. Anyway, I just thought that was an interesting entry into our political rounding. There's lots of other finer points that we should touch on that have more to do with stories of the day over the last couple of days that we can use to fill our last 40 minutes or so. One interesting point on the migration front that I thought was of interest, Philip Bump, always of interest, over at the Washington Post, pointing this one out. I missed this happening entirely, so it's good to point out. And I think it says it all here in the headline, but we'll get the particulars. It's scarier to refer to immigrants as, quote, military-aged males than men. What's happening here, right? To bolster the invasion claim. It's not an invasion. What are you talking about? Well, some large percentage of the migrants arriving at the border are, in fact, military-aged males. Well, they are, but military-aged males describes an enormous swath of humanity, for one thing, and probably also an even larger swath of the people who are physically capable of making this arduous journey all the way to the United States border and attempting to cross it. But it's not because they're an invading army. It's because they are fleeing the other country whose army they supposedly are, I guess, in the minds of people who think of immigration as an invasion, like we were mentioning yesterday or the other day. It's an odd thing, this weird invasion where 100% of the troops that present themselves at the border are here to defect to the American side. It is kind of a weird way of thinking of an invasion, don't you think? Well, so who's using this rhetoric and why? Let's find out. House Speaker Mike Johnson is not only a politician, but a politician among politicians. Well, that's true. One does not ascend to the most powerful position in the House without being particularly adept at politics, even within the world of politics, however clunky that ascent might have been. Well, from time to time, they do ascend, even without being particularly adept. Let's say the immediate previous speaker, for instance, would be a good example of that. So, when Johnson rose to speak on the House floor Wednesday, his first such speech since being elected speaker, and began to talk about immigration, it was through the lens of a politician seeking to effect a political outcome. Yes, everyone who speaks from the House floor is doing so for political purposes, but in this speech, from this person, in this election year and on this subject, everything was colored by that political intent, as demonstrated in his word choice. Johnson's speech went on at some length, focusing on Republican resistance to new legislation aimed at addressing the border and his party's efforts to impeach Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. To a layperson, his arguments were probably compelling, interweaving condemnation of the Biden administration with data points aimed at supplementing that common condemnation. At one point, for example, Johnson lamented the existing process for arriving immigrants. Millions of immigrants, he said, were, quote, spending many years in the United States before they're even expected to appear before a judge. Some of them are given a piece of paper that says, we'll see you in a decade. It's absurd. It is. It is also a function of the strained system that handles asylum claims. There was already an enormous backlog of cases before the recent increase in arrivals. That increase has simply exacerbated the problem. The Biden administration has called for new funding that would allow for more immigration judges, reducing those wait times and reducing the amount of time that migrants are allowed to remain in the country. Johnson has instead insisted that the administration focus on blocking more people from coming in the first place. By the way, has anybody suggested I got an idea. How about instead of more money for the border and immigration judges, we let AI make the decisions in the immigration cases? That's free, and they work for free, and they're infallible computers or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And we can just, but we program, just give everybody asylum. How's that? It's easy enough. The big drawback of the AI solutions is, well, does it really work? Or how often does it turn out to be that it's really just an algorithm to rubber stamp some given outcome, and we just do that over and over, and we give it a pass because it's AI doing it. It's artificial intelligence. It's it's not my fault it's coming up with solutions I, quote unquote, don't like, or that you, quote unquote, don't like. It's doing it all on its own. It's programmed to give everybody asylum. Fine. No backlog and no extra money. All of a sudden, we find out how opposed Republicans really are to the tech bros project of AI solving every problem. That's weird. Anyway, give it a shot. Anyhow, back to Philip Bump. At another point, Johnson unfavorably compared Biden with the man for whom he'd once served as vice president. We've learned that the Biden administration is now simply releasing 85% of the illegals who come across that border right into the country. Johnson said they're coming to a neighborhood near you. That certainly deserves horror dramatic music. Well, I gotta tell you, good. I can't wait for the delicious arepas. Venezuelan food is delicious. I'm not as familiar with Guatemalan, Honduran. El Salvador, pupusas, beautiful, delicious. Honestly, if we had a taco truck on every corner that was serving these foods, I'd be very happy about it. Plus, of course, the employment would be fantastic as well. Not to mention how much better your lunch is going to be. But anyway, that scares them. They would like a model of Noah's Ark on every corner instead. More on by the way, Noah's Ark, these days, interestingly enough, here's a good question. Would Noah want just two humans on board? And by the way, he did favor humans in that situation, right? There was two of every animal, but how many humans on that ark? So how many kids did he have? 3 sons? And did they bring their wives with them? And then him and all right. Well, anyway, I've lost count. The Bible scholars can tell me about that one. But okay, obviously, the Bible, written way back when, dominion over the earth, et cetera, et cetera. You're going to favor the human beings over this one. But so here's the question. I'm sure that Republicans say, well, yeah, just 2 humans go on the new ark here. We're race blind. We don't see color. But it would be interesting if it's just sort of interesting, the idea of loving the story of Noah's Ark and how it saved the animal kingdom from climatological disaster. And now here we are. And then they go through the Jesus phase, love thy neighbor, yada, yada, him being a refugee, not being able to find a place to stay in Bethlehem, etc. And now they've somewhere in the intervening 2,000 years, it's become to hell with the climate thing, shoot everybody at the border, shoot thy neighbor, and do so while cleaning your gun, shoot him through the apartment wall inadvertently, shoot him at the wall, what have you. Okay. Anyway, back to the story. Right. They're coming to a neighborhood near you, which they regard as a bad thing. More on that bit of fear-mongering in a second, though. He continued, Mike Johnson said, for reference, by the way, if you're watching the metrics, in 2013, the Obama administration, listen to this, the Obama administration detained 82% detained 82% of illegal aliens. How do we go from detaining 82% to releasing 85%? Well, of course, they're two different things. The detaining, very often detainment ends with release at some point, and depending on where you release them, I guess it could make a difference, but you're comparing detention to release because there's an 80 in both. It's a dumb comparison. But anyway, how do we go from detaining 82% to releasing 85%? It only happens if this is by design. It only happens if it's an orchestrated, intentional effort by the administration to do exactly that. That by design line is eyebrow-raising, given the popularity on the right of conspiracy theory, that the theory is specifically that Democrats are throwing open the entry doors to the country for some putative future political gain. It's really for the food. But the numbers are worth considering, too. we can do a simple bit of math here. There are only so many people you can detain, given limits on space and staffing. Adding more capacity of this sort is another element of discussions about the border. In fiscal year 2013, there were about 414,000 people encountered at the border, that is, stopped from entering. In fiscal year 2023, there were nearly 2.5 million, or 2,475,669 to be precise. Why might Obama have detained 82%? While Biden released 85%. Well, and that's just taking the comparison of those two different metrics at face value, which is probably unwise, but also doesn't hold up, as it turns out, because 82% of 414,000 is about 340,000. 15% of 2,475,669, the detained percentage in 2023, according to Johnson, is about 371,000. That suggests a capacity issue, which I'm sure it does. But even if you take the comparison at face value, what that means is it's another way of saying the same thing, right? Mike Johnson puts it this way. Under the Obama administration, when if we accept the most favorable reason for making the comparison between those detained and those released, even though those detained were often released, you still get this. Mike Johnson says 82% of those encountered under the Obama administration were detained. He would love for you to think, for some reason, indefinitely, even though he doesn't support the Obama administration. But he's just trying to make that point that they're better than Biden. Whereas 85% of the people encountered are never detained, is what he would like you to believe. I don't know if that's really the truth. 85% of those encountered under the Biden administration are released without any detention whatsoever. That, if true, is interesting, but what Bump is telling you about the math, the increase in the number of people moving across the border and being encountered by authorities of one kind or another, actually the Biden administration detained 31,000 more such migrants than the Obama administration at its peak. So he's telling you, well, I didn't agree with the Obama administration. I thought it was too lax, but at least it was detaining 82% of those that it encountered. Going by percentages, yeah. I mean, if you're a detention fan, that's not going to be good. But raw numbers, why not do that? That's interesting too, right? The Obama administration detained 340,000 people. The Biden administration detained 371,000 people. Well, that's more, isn't it? That's true. But maybe it's not such a great idea to be detaining them in the first place. And then again, yeah. So if Obama was straining the capacity of the system by detaining 340,000, what's happening now? But never mind all of that. We're getting somewhat away from the sharpest political element here, the rhetoric encompassed in Johnson's neighborhood near you line. This idea that immigrants are inherently frightening is a key part of the Republican discussion of the border, given that it heightens a sense of urgency and failure regarding the administration. Johnson described speaking to agents at the border. They noted, this is the quote from Johnson, that we are experiencing a surge, listen to this, he says, of military-aged single men who are pouring into our country over the southern border. From adversarial nations, by the way, and from terrorist regimes. Really? He said that he was told, well, I was told it. What can I do? He was told that 60 to 70% of those entering were single men who were, quote, military-aged. Or, by the way, another way of describing the same sort of person, able-bodied and able to work, right? And there to work. Exactly who would be sent ahead to earn money to, say, send back to a family in Central America so that they might be able to actually survive and stay there. Or, he could certainly be paving the way for the family to join him, which is fine. But, do you want to give him the benefit of the doubt? He's sending money back to say, well, we can't have that. Why not? Because they're military aged. Well, are they in the military? No. Are they able-bodied? Yeah, they're able-bodied. They should be working, but somewhere else somehow for some reason. These, he says, are not huddled masses of families seeking refuge in asylum, he continued. They are huddled masses of individuals seeking refuge in asylum. Totally different, obviously. It takes very little unpacking to see that the frightening veneer that Johnson is applying here. What is a military-aged man? Well, it's a relatively young guy who, in another less politically loaded context, might be called a working-aged man. It's all framing. Johnson wants listeners to hear the phrase military-aged and assume that the immigrants are dangerous and intend to harm Americans. Had he said working-aged, the reaction would have been very different and evoked a very different, more common perception of immigrants. We've heard this term before, as it turns out. Hey, it was Ron DeSantis who used it during the last Republican presidential debate. You may be unsurprised to learn that it has been in increasing usage on Fox News as well, particularly on Sean Hannity's show. And here's a chart establishing that for us. What's worth noting is that the number of single adults stopped at the border began to increase in 2020 during the Trump administration. It rose steadily until mid-2021 when it hit 120,000 people, and since then, the monthly average of single adults stopped at the border has been 130,000. In the early part of the Biden administration, that was inflated in part by a policy that quickly deported single adults, allowing them to enter the country more than once in a month. Oh, interesting. In recent months, single adults have made up about half of those stopped at the border, though the average since Biden took office is 64%. By the way, can I just point out in all of this, you'll recall, of course, the migrant crises created during the Trump administration. We have to have family separation, and we're going to do that in order to send a message to the migrants. If you come here, you will be separated from your children. Don't bring your children here. So what's the result? A surge in single men, either without children or leaving their children behind, as instructed, coming to the border instead and saying, well, rather than risk the death of the entire family and my children in particular and making this arduous crossing, we'll do it the next best way. I'll go. I'll risk my own life because I'm able-bodied, I'm young, I'm relatively healthy. And when I get across the border, if I can get across the border, perhaps I can work and send back money, and we can either cross the border for the rest of you in more reasonable circumstances, or you can stay at home and I can support you with what I earn here, whatever. This was by design, right? The Trump administration was trying to force people to come to the border this way if they were going to come to the border at all. Now they are, in fact, coming to the border this way. And, they're military aged. It's an invasion. So we got you coming and going. It's a catch-22. They were never going to, of course, accept immigration. And they were very obvious about that. We should be clear about that. Anyway, remember, Bump goes on, that single adult doesn't mean military-aged male, by the way. And that's all that they're checking at the border. How many people have we got here? Has he got any family with him or her? No? Okay, fine. Single adult, not military-aged. They don't take that measure. It means men and women, military-aged, ages 18 to 75. How do you like that? Well, that's just about everybody. There's little question that most of those entering the United States as individual adults are, in fact, younger men, but even the numbers above in this chart that they have here are overrepresentative. Again, Johnson's trying to make a political point, not simply to convey to the public what's occurring at the border in impartial terms. So a 24-year-old looking guy who comes looking for work, well, 24 looking or not. I guess I mixed up the lookings there. But a 24-year-old guy looking for work who comes to the United States is suddenly lumped into an imaginary army of invaders, bolstering not only Johnson's rhetoric, but the argument of Republicans such as Texas Governor Greg Abbott, whose fight with the federal government over the border is framed in terms of an invasion. Abbott would understandably rather not have those new arrivals described as people looking for work, because it makes him look like an insensitive jerk and a murderer at that. So Yes, an important framing point that I thought I might sneak in here, and I guess I've successfully done that. By the way, the upcoming caravan to the border of Take Our Border Back lunatics in trucks, right? Apparently also breaking down along the way. I've got a Wired story to share with you about, with more details about that. Perhaps we can make that a Friday thing. We can get back to the extremely important story about Taylor Swift. And perhaps on Friday, unravel the rest of the weird network of finances behind the somehow Chinese-connected tech bro guy who nonetheless considers himself a big socialist and lefty-left donor who apparently is behind the operations these days of Code Pink, which is kind of weird. A subject we broached yesterday. Perhaps we can complete it later in the week. That means tomorrow. Okay, time now to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Next, right here on Netroots Radio. And here's what he's got on tap for you. Trump insisted to reporters that he won that New York fraud and E. Jean Carroll case and that there were no penalties. Good. Glad he's going to get back and provide some details on that one. We just hinted at it. On the rest of his menu today, the newest member of the Oregon House of Representatives is a frothing MAGA who claimed supporting drag queens and LGBTQ+ was akin to supporting child abuse and pedophilia. Same as always, basically. There, 25 California counties have sued electric car manufacturer Tesla for mishandling hazardous waste at more than 100 facilities throughout the state.
Netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
How about another teaser or two before we leave? How about this? A small venture capital firm faced tough questions about DEI from a tribunal of conservative federal judges in Florida as it defended a grant program for black women-owned businesses. How dare you do that with your own money or something like that? I don't know. Stay tuned for more. We'll see you tomorrow.